August 4th, 2020. It was a Tuesday evening in Beirut, Lebanon. But it was only the beginning. White smoke rose from the port, then fireworks, then everything changed. One of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. Over 218 lives lost. 7,000 people injured. That was only the beginning. What really happened that day? September 2013. A cargo ship carrying 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate stopped in Beirut for refueling. Port authorities found serious defects. The ship was abandoned. The cargo remained. For 6 years, that deadly cargo sat in Warehouse 12, stored alongside fireworks in the middle of a densely populated city. Port officials sent letters. They filed reports. No one did anything about it. Lebanon was already suffering. The economy had collapsed. COVID-19 overwhelmed hospitals. Protests against corruption raged for months. But no one could have imagined what was coming. At 5:45 p.m., white smoke began rising from Warehouse 12. A fire had started. At 5:55 p.m., 9 firefighters and 1 paramedic were dispatched. When they arrived, they reported something strange. The fire was immense. Something was wrong. At 6:07 p.m., the first explosion. Triggered by stored fireworks, gray smoke and bright flashes filled the air. People across Beirut grabbed their phones. One couple watched from their 11th floor balcony, less than 600 meters from the port. The woman told her husband to come inside. She felt like something bad was about to happen. He didn't answer, looking like he was in shock. 33 seconds passed. No one knew that the fire had reached 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate. 6:08 in the evening. The second explosion. The blast released energy comparable to 1.1 kiloton of TNT. It registered as a seismic event of magnitude 3.3. The shockwave was felt in Syria, Israel, and Cyprus. A mushroom cloud rose into the sky. Pink and orange smoke filled the air. In that instant, Beirut was torn apart. The port was obliterated. Ships were tossed like toys. The shockwave shattered windows across half the city. Buildings collapsed. Walls exploded inward. Cars were lifted and thrown. The couple on their balcony were both knocked unconscious. When the woman woke, her husband was covered in glass and bleeding profusely. She was injured too, but crawled through debris to get help. He needed 6 hours of surgery. She needed 3 hours. A journalist on his motorcycle was thrown off by the shockwave. His helmet saved his life. A woman in her apartment felt the ground shake. Her sister screamed that everything was falling. They ran into the hallway thinking it was an earthquake. Then the second explosion hit. All windows blew out. Her sister flew across the room. The front door hit them both. She later discovered she had fractured her arm. One woman was sleeping when she felt what seemed like an earthquake. She rushed to her mother. The second explosion hurled her from her bed to outside her house. All windows were broken. When reports on TV said the blast was at the port, they called her father. He worked there. He was not answering. He was not supposed to be at work that day, but he was there. And he was gone. A survivor ran down the street to find out what happened. Blood, death, wrecked cars everywhere. Everything reminded them of the Lebanese Civil War. All they could think about was how they had survived both the war and this explosion. When the dust settled, the horror became visible. A massive crater marked where Warehouse 12 had stood. Over 77,000 apartments were destroyed or damaged. 300,000 people were left homeless. Streets were blocked by debris. Hospitals were overwhelmed. More than 7,000 people were injured. Emergency rooms were flooded with patients covered in blood and glass. A diving instructor who volunteered in rescue operations described the real feeling as emptiness at seeing all of this. Visibility in the crater was zero. Rescuers had to feel their way with their hands. Over 218 people were killed. The firefighters who had responded to the initial fire were never found. They had been at the epicenter. Nothing remained. One woman searching for her husband said what she saw killed her heart. She saw people in pieces. She saw people mutilated while searching for him. Rescue crews worked through the night. Volunteers formed human chains. Neighbors helped neighbors. But there was constant fear of secondary explosions. This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a man-made disaster born of corruption and negligence. Documents show dozens of officials had been warned about the ammonium nitrate. Everyone knew it was dangerous, but no one removed it. Protesters filled the streets demanding accountability. Who was responsible? Why were 2,750 tons of explosives stored in a city for 6 years? The Prime Minister and his cabinet resigned within a week. A domestic investigation was launched, but the investigation was obstructed at every turn. Politicians filed legal challenges, and the probe was suspended repeatedly. To this day, no one has been held accountable. The international community called for an independent investigation. Over 300 organizations demanded answers, but Lebanon's political elite refused. They blocked investigations. They protected each other. For survivors, life has never been the same. The sight or sound of broken glass gives them anxiety. They freeze when they hear wind against windows because it reminds them of the explosion. Hearing children scream, even in delight, takes them back to that day. Trauma haunts many of them. The explosion destroyed the nation's grain silo and main port, which handled 60% of imports. Damage was estimated at $15 billion. 5 years have passed. The grain silos collapsed in 2022. The port remains in ruins, and still, no justice, no accountability. The Beirut explosion wasn't an accident. It was a crime born of decades of mismanagement and corruption. And until those responsible are held accountable, the explosion continues to claim victims, in the trauma that haunts survivors, in the justice that remains denied. But the survivors refuse to forget. They march, they protest, they demand truth, because 218 lives lost deserve more than silence. They deserve justice. Every storm eventually ends, but the way we hold each other, the way we demand justice for those who were lost, the way we refuse to let corruption go unchallenged, that remains.